Let's turn to the firestorm President Trump ignited this week when he told ABC News that he did not see anything wrong with receiving information on political rivals from a foreign actor. On Friday, he then told Fox News that, of course, his words, he would alert the FBI after reviewing the material. The president's remarks outraged Democrats in Congress, and some said, as they have been saying, it's time to begin the impeachment process.
It seems as though we're kind of sitting on our hands. So if now isn't the time, then I think a lot of folks would like to know when is the time.
Speaker Pelosi facing a lot of that pressure. We've been talking about it for weeks, about the impeachment question. But the president's comments about foreign intelligence, what message does that send to the intelligence community? People like FBI Director Chris Wray.
It says that the president is going to openly criticize you, and the president's going to do that really with his own political success in the back of his mind. So I think when we think about all that this president has said, all the scandals, all the controversies, something like this will stand out, I think, in time and in history, because what we had was the president essentially saying, in 2020, I'm open again to talking to foreign countries about dirt on my political opponents. And I think Nancy Pelosi's in this space where AOC and other freshmen on Capitol Hill, they want fast movement. They want some reaction. Nancy Pelosi, though, this week was very cautious, and she said, look, I'm not going to be pushed into any one thing being the thing that's going to push me into trying to get impeachment proceedings. And I think what she wants at the end of this, if she ever does end up going for impeachment proceedings, is to say, look, I held it as long as I possibly could. This is now about patriotism. This is now about the country. And I think when we see her weathering all these scandals and not going knee-jerk reaction into impeachment talk, that might give her more credibility.
Look, I mean, one of the things you have to think about here is how vulnerable is this president, right? I mean, he views the idea of getting intelligence from a foreign power for his campaign as a potential strength for his campaign. But the same thing can happen on the other side, right? The Chinese could go out and get his tax returns from an American computer, steal those, put them onto WikiLeaks or the equivalent thereof, and put that out there. Or, the next Stormy Daniels set of documents, whatever the president's vulnerabilities might be, those are hackable. So if the president is sending a signal here to foreign intelligence services, look, it's okay for Americans to take a look at whatever you guys produce, you're going to have a lot of hostile foreign intelligence services playing in the 2020 election.
It is illegal, though. I mean, you look at what FEC Chair Ellen Weintraub said this week. She said she had to issue a tweet saying, I would not have thought I needed to say this. She said it is illegal to accept a campaign contribution or information from a foreign national. You have to report it to the FBI.
Yeah, there's a legal debate here as to whether, derogatory information about Hillary Clinton would constitute a thing of value under the law, right? We haven't tested that in the court, I think, before. You could make the argument it is, but
Mueller shied away from saying
Mueller shied away from that. Nobody
So
accused any and made an illegal assertion in that regard. The more interesting thing, in some ways, is how a president who had basically kind of moved on past the Russia thing, and the conversation now is about obstruction of justice and the subpoena fight. Could he be impeached for things that were actually not about Russia specifically? And now he's put Russia back on the table.
But why can't he move on?
Ashley probably has a better sense of it. She wrote a good piece on impeachment this week. But I think he's just absolutely obsessed about this, and he just wants to, prove he's right and undercut anybody who's questioning his legitimacy.
Well, one reason is, again, first, I think what he said, that he was open, again, to foreign intelligence, you have to take him at his word. That's what he said in a public interview. But something people close to him have said is this also comes down to what a lot of things with him come down to, which is his legitimacy. And so when he went out there in that interview and said this, part of it was him sort of trying to say, I did nothing wrong the first time. That whole thing you're attacking me for, that witch hunt, what I've called it, there was nothing wrong with it, and therefore I would do it again. So they sort of stress it's not so much that he would do it again. He was trying to defend what he had done before, and also, frankly, defend his son, his namesake eldest son, who did take that meeting. And so he's in this tough place where it felt almost deeply personal rather than the info he really wanted.
On Capitol Hill that same day testifying,
exactly.
So it was on the top of it.
Let's stay with this legitimacy point, because it's so important to understand, if you're asking why doesn't Leader McConnell and the Senate move on this legislation about reporting to the FBI if you get foreign information, is that because, Ashley, you have Republicans wary of angering this president, knowing he's so sensitive about the legitimacy of what happened in 2016? They don't want to pursue these kind of things in the Senate because of that underlying issue.
Well, they don't want to, they've shown a deep unwillingness to cross him on any number of issues. And there's certain case studies when you do, if you look at Justin Amash, who's now going to get a primary, where they just don't want to go there. But they are aware of the legitimacy issue, that is what drove everything. When they talk about the Mueller probe, they sort of say the whole obstruction bucket would not have even happened but for the fact, because of what the president felt was a threat on his legitimacy, we watched him self-sabotage and self-destruct in real time for 2 years.
Now, imagine if you're the U.S. intelligence community watching all this week. Earlier in the week, we had the president say, when it was revealed that Kim Jong-un's half-brother or family member had been a source of information for the CIA, the president said, well, that wouldn't happen under my watch. So you're, in effect, suggesting to the CIA that they shouldn't gather intelligence on hostile governments from useful sources. And then they see this. Their heads must be spinning at Langley trying to figure out how do they gather intelligence in a world where the president is saying we're not going to, or we're going to put a slowdown on spying on the North Koreans, and we're also sending signals that says that the United States election in 2020 is open for foreign interference.
And this issue is not some issue that's way out there in left field. There was a hearing this week on deep fake videos, all of the different social disinformation campaigns that are going to be expected in 2020.
Well, one of the most remarkable things, and Ashley's talked about it, this idea that he's worried about his presidency not being seen as legitimate, but it's also about his ego and this idea that he can sell to the American people, that this is just the way that things work. I think enveloped in his conversation was this idea that, oh, if you look at lawmakers, who wouldn't want this information? Who would call the FBI? What kind of person calls the FBI? It's almost like saying no snitches. And it's this idea that this is the president of the United States talking sort of like a mobster. And I think that is part of the president's ego, part of his personality. He thinks that, I think, as a result, he can ride this wave and be politically successful regardless. When Eamon was talking about this idea that people could hack and get his tax returns or get the next Stormy Daniels, but I was thinking to myself, he's already weathered those things. He's already weathered Stormy Daniels. He's already weathered people knowing that he was a millionaire at 8 years old. So in some ways, in his mind, he might think, even if I'm invincible, go ahead and try to hack me.
Ashley?
Yeah, I mean, this gets to a sort of different point, but one thing I think we're going to see the Democrats struggle with is sort of what I think of as asymmetrical warfare, which is that the same rules of engagement, for whatever reason, don't apply to the president. So that could be hacking a different candidate's tax returns if they choose not to release them, could be devastating for his Democratic rival, but for him, there's absolutely no problem. Same thing with lies or mistruths. He can go up and he's paid no price generally with his supporters, and you could see him on a debate stage with someone else who fudges the facts, and they pay a tremendous price.
Peter, when we're talking about the impeachment issue in the House, it seems like it comes up every week. The Democrats, Speaker Pelosi, say the president has committed offenses that could be impeachable, but they don't really move forward on impeachment proceedings. Is that because, regardless of each week's controversy, this week it's the ABC News interview, Democrats are seeing polling or hearing from constituents that they just rather not see the Democrats go in that direction?
I think a mix of things. I think I mean, we are sort of in an impeachment inquiry. We're just not calling it that, right?
Yeah.
And their strategy is to see if over time they get enough testimony or evidence that somehow changes that dynamic. You're right. Polls show Americans don't want him impeached right now. No, none of them do. Like 40 to 45% have said that they might be for opening an impeachment inquiry, but a majority doesn't. And so do you overcome a democratic election without a mandate from the public? And it is a political process. The framers rested it in the House of Representatives for a reason. That's a political body. And so it's not surprising that they would have an eye to what's happening politically if they took this risk.
Look, what they're struggling with is what happens if you impeach in the House and then send it to a Republican Senate, right? So they can have an impeachment vote. They can probably get it done in Pelosi's caucus in the House. But then you send it to the Senate for a trial, and it looks like, with the Republican majority, the president would be acquitted. And so at that point, Democrats have sort of run this flag up the flagpole and then back down again, and they feel like that would be a political loser.
And you've exposed, 20, 30 Democrats who sit in Trump districts, right?
Yeah,
who may have just won their seats, who are leaning to the center or to the right as it is, and you've exposed them on a vote that might cost them.
Right.
And I was talking to a House Democrat this week who was prepared to rally around the impeachment idea because of what was happening in that ABC News interview. Then they said a torrent of new things happened. You got the president flips his statement on Fox News and a call-in. You got what's happening with Iran, that even if Democrats try to seize on something and bring it to public attention, there's a wave of new pieces of news that make it harder for them to make that case.